The bright studio lights of The View flickered above the bustling set, casting an almost surreal glow on the lively group gathered at the table. The energy in the air was electric as the show was about to go live, and the audience waited in anticipation. On any other day, the conversation might have been light-hearted, filled with jokes and banter. But today, something felt different. Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor known for his calm demeanor and deep respect for others, was sitting among the hosts, listening intently as they discussed current events. He was used to being in the spotlight, but this was different. He wasn't here to promote a movie or talk about his career. Today, he had agreed to be a guest on The View to discuss important social issues, something Keanu felt strongly about. As the conversation shifted toward the topic of religion, the atmosphere in the studio seemed to shift with it. The lead host, a sharp-witted woman named Megan, casually mentioned Jesus in a way that seemed to mock the very essence of the faith that so many held dear. Her words were dripping with sarcasm, designed to provoke reaction, but Keanu wasn't prepared for what came next. "You know," Megan said with a laugh, "sometimes I think it's just easier to believe in Santa Claus than Jesus. At least, he's a bit more relatable, don't you think?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the other hosts. Keanu felt his stomach drop. He could feel his face flush with anger, but he remained calm, keeping his composure as he forced a smile. However, deep inside, a storm was brewing. He couldn't just sit there and ignore what had just been said. Not this time. The cameras rolled on, but Keanu's mind was racing. Did I really just hear that? Did she just mock Jesus on live television? The audience was laughing, but Keanu was no longer part of the conversation. His thoughts were consumed with one question: what do I do now? As Megan continued to speak, oblivious to the growing tension at the table, Keanu stood up slowly, his gaze locked on hers. The world seemed to stop as all eyes turned to him. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but unwavering. "Actually, Megan," Keanu began, his voice firm yet measured, "I think you've just crossed a line, and I can't stay quiet about it. What would you do if you found yourself in Keanu's shoes? Would you stand up for your beliefs or stay quiet to avoid confrontation?" Before we dive deeper into this intense moment, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing more thought-provoking stories like this one. Keanu Reeves was not just a Hollywood icon. He was a man of profound humility, someone who seemed to possess a wisdom that few could match. Born in Beirut, Lebanon, and raised in Toronto, Canada, Keanu's life had been anything but easy. He had faced hardship from a young age. His father left when he was only 3 years old, leaving Keanu to grow up with his mother and a series of other family members. His childhood was marked by moving from place to place, never really feeling settled. But it was his mother, Patricia, who became his anchor. Patricia, a costume designer and performer, was a woman of great strength and compassion, and it was she who instilled in Keanu a deep sense of love and respect for others. From her, Keanu learned the importance of kindness, of humility, and most notably of faith. Though he was not the most overtly religious person, Keanu's spirituality ran deep. He grew up surrounded by various cultures and beliefs, but his connection to the Christian faith was a quiet and personal one. It was never about attending church every Sunday or speaking about faith to the world. It was about living it, about treating people with dignity and love, just as Jesus had taught. He believed in the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated. It was his relationship with his mother that shaped this perspective most strongly. She had always taught him to stand up for what he believed was right, even when it was difficult. In the face of adversity, she told him, it was the quiet, humble actions of love and respect that would speak the loudest. Keanu had taken that lesson to heart, but his life hadn't been without sorrow. In 2000, Keanu faced an unimaginable tragedy when his beloved girlfriend Jennifer Syme passed away in a car accident. She had been 8 months pregnant with their child, a daughter they had planned to name Ava. The loss devastated Keanu, but instead of turning inward in anger or bitterness, he sought solace in the teachings of love, forgiveness, and the deep sense of peace that comes with embracing one's faith. His grief, though immense, did not consume him. It transformed him. Keanu began to realize that his role in the world wasn't just about fame or accolades. It was about using his platform to be a force for good, to show others that kindness, love, and faith could shine even in the darkest times. And it was his belief in these values that brought him to the View that fateful day. He wanted to talk about social issues, to encourage dialogue and understanding, but he never expected that the conversation would take such a turn. Sitting there in front of the cameras with the weight of the world on his shoulders, Keanu's thoughts returned to the teachings of his mother. This is my moment. If I don't say something now, what kind of example will I be setting? Keanu's quiet strength had always been his defining trait, but would his inner peace and unwavering belief in his values be enough to confront what was happening in front of him? And would he be able to make his voice heard in a world where so many seemed content to mock what he held sacred? As the show continued, Keanu knew that the time to speak up was now. The next few moments would test his courage, but also define who he truly was. Do you think Keanu's quiet faith has made him stronger? Have you ever had to stand up for your beliefs in a public way? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. If you're curious to see how Keanu's confrontation plays out, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next chapter in this powerful story. The tension in the studio had become palpable. Keanu's words hung in the air, a moment of silence stretching long enough for everyone to feel the weight of his gaze. Megan, the host who had mocked Jesus just moments before, seemed momentarily caught off guard. Her smile faded, and for a brief second there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The other hosts who had been laughing just moments ago grew quiet. The audience, sensing the sudden shift, hushed. The cameras zoomed in on Keanu, capturing his calm but unwavering expression. He was standing no longer merely a guest but a man on a mission. He wasn't just speaking out for himself. He was speaking for the millions of people who had been hurt by Megan's careless words. "I think you may have misunderstood," Keanu continued, his voice steady but firm. "It's one thing to express your opinions, but mocking something so sacred to so many people, that crosses a line." Megan, now visibly flustered, quickly tried to recover. "Keanu, I didn't mean—" "No," Keanu interrupted, his eyes locking onto hers. "It's not just about your intent. It's about the impact. There are millions of people watching, people who hold their faith close to their hearts, and mocking Jesus, mocking anyone's faith, isn't a joke. It's a hurtful action." The studio was dead silent now. It wasn't just the hosts and audience who were taken aback. There was a ripple of discomfort, the kind that you feel when someone does something unexpected, something that makes you question the norms. "I don't think you intended to cause harm, but your words have consequences," Keanu added, his tone softening a little but still intense. Megan, ever the professional, regained her composure. She cleared her throat and tried to steer the conversation back into safer territory. "Well, Keanu, I think we can agree that humor is subjective. Not everyone takes things so seriously." Keanu's eyes didn't leave hers. "Humor should never come at the expense of respect. If we can't respect each other's beliefs, then we're just creating division." The rest of the hosts exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to proceed. Some of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others remained unusually quiet, their eyes darting between Keanu and Megan. Keanu, however, wasn't done. He had been pushed to the edge, and now he felt it was his responsibility to ensure this message was heard, no matter how uncomfortable it made the people around him. "You know," he began, his voice calm but heavy with meaning, "when you mock something so personal, you're not just mocking a belief. You're mocking the people who live by it, the families who raise their children with those values, the communities that are built around love and faith. It's not something to take lightly." There was no humor left in the room, no playful banter. Keanu's words were sinking in, and though they stung, they were the truth. And the truth, especially when it came to a topic as sacred as faith, had a way of cutting through all the noise. Megan shifted in her chair, her attempt at recovering, slipping away. Her usual confidence now seemed brittle. I didn't mean to offend anyone," she said, but her words felt hollow. Keanu let out a sigh. "I'm not here to tell you how to run your show, Megan. I'm just asking you to think about what you say next time. It's not about silencing anyone's freedom of speech. It's about recognizing the power our words hold and the responsibility we have when we speak to millions of people. The audience was rapt with attention, unsure of how to react. Some were nodding in agreement, others remained frozen, unsure if they should clap or remain silent. Keanu had put them all in a position where they had to confront a difficult truth. Words matter. Megan, still visibly uncomfortable, tried to change the subject again. Let's move on to a lighter topic, shall we? But Keanu, ever persistent, wasn't ready to let it go. No, Keanu said, his voice cutting through the tension. This isn't something that should just be brushed aside. Have you ever felt the weight of someone's words in a moment when you least expected it? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. Let's talk about the power of words and why they matter. If you're as invested as I am in this unfolding story, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how Keanu's stand affects the rest of the show. The studio remained in a stunned silence, the tension thick in the air like a fog that refused to lift. Keanu's words had landed with the force of a thunderclap, reverberating in the hearts and minds of those in the room. Yet, this wasn't just about one moment of confrontation. It was about the ripple effects of speaking out, the courage to stand up for something deeper than personal opinions. And as the cameras continued rolling, Keanu knew this would be more than just a fleeting exchange. In the aftermath of the heated exchange, the producers were scrambling behind the scenes, unsure how to navigate the growing tension on set. The typical chaos of a live show had been replaced by something far more serious. Keanu had set the tone. He wasn't just here to promote his latest film. He had used his platform to make a statement about respect, faith, and the responsibility of those with a voice. As Megan attempted to regain control of the conversation, her attempt to redirect the discussion felt flat. She quickly moved the topic to something light-hearted, asking the other hosts about their recent vacations, but the atmosphere had shifted. Keanu, however, wasn't about to let it fade. He remained still, his hands resting lightly on the table, his eyes focused on the hosts but not speaking. Despite the pressure of being live on TV, Keanu's composure remained unshaken. He had grown used to being in the public eye, but this was different. This was no longer about Hollywood glitz or casual interviews. This was about something much more significant, a battle for integrity in a world that too often allowed harmful words to slip by unchallenged. The producers cut to a quick commercial break, but Keanu could feel the weight of the moment. It wasn't just the cameras or the audience. It was his own heart, telling him that this wasn't the time to back down. He could feel that deep in his gut, the stirring of a greater truth that had to be voiced. And though he had always been a private person, in this moment, he felt a profound responsibility to speak for those who didn't have a platform. When the cameras flickered back on, Megan tried once more to steer the show in a different direction. "Keanu, let's get back to your work," she suggested, her voice now lacking its usual sharpness. "Tell us about your latest movie. I'm sure everyone would love to hear more about that." Keanu took a moment, his expression softening slightly, but there was a quiet intensity behind his eyes. "I've had a great career in Hollywood. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had. But today I didn't come here to talk about my movies," he began, his voice calm but unmistakably resolute. "I came here because for me it's more important to stand for something bigger. We all have a responsibility to be mindful of the words we use." The audience, sensing his unwavering commitment, grew silent. Even the other hosts, who had initially seemed ready to move on, found themselves caught in his conviction. It wasn't just about a single comment on a TV show anymore. It was about something universal, something that transcended politics, culture, and entertainment. It was about humanity, about the dignity of all people, and about recognizing the power of our voices. Keanu continued, "It's not about whether you agree with someone's faith or beliefs. It's about respect. At the end of the day, we all share this world together. We need to lift each other up, not tear each other down." For a moment, the studio was silent once more, as though time itself had frozen in place. Megan, now visibly rattled, nodded slowly. The once casual and mocking Tone of the conversation had completely evaporated, replaced by an air of contemplation. The hosts, though professional, were all grappling with the gravity of Keanu's words. "You're right," one of the other hosts finally said, her voice soft but sincere. "Maybe we don't always think about the consequences of our words as much as we should. We get caught up in the moment, in the humor, and forget about the impact." Keanu smiled faintly, though it wasn't a smile of satisfaction. It was the kind of smile that came with knowing that perhaps, just maybe, he had made a difference in a small but significant way. He wasn't looking for applause. He was looking for understanding. What would you do if you were in Keanu's shoes? Would you have the courage to speak out in the face of such a controversial moment? Let's continue this conversation in the comments below. If you're ready to see how Keanu's message resonates with the world, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There's more to come as the story unfolds. The camera's red light glowed, ominously, casting a soft hue over the faces of everyone in the studio. Keanu's words hung in the air, the weight of his statement still reverberating through the room. Megan, the show's lead host, sat frozen for a moment. For the first time in her career, she wasn't sure how to recover from what had just transpired. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Megan, typically quick-witted and able to spin any situation into something palatable for the audience, was now facing a reality she had never quite imagined. She had underestimated the power of her words, and more importantly, she had underestimated the calm strength of Keanu Reeves. For a moment, the tension was unbearable. The studio audience was still silent, sensing the emotional undercurrent of the situation. Keanu, on the other hand, appeared unaffected by the weight of the moment. His face was composed, his hands resting calmly on the table, but his eyes, those deep contemplative eyes, spoke volumes. Then something unexpected happened. A voice from the back of the studio interrupted the silence. It was a voice Keanu recognized immediately. It was the voice of a young man, a crew member from the production team, who had quietly been watching the exchange from behind the cameras. His words broke through the stillness, and they carried a weight that none of the hosts had anticipated. "Keanu, you're right," the young man said, his voice shaky but sincere. "I was raised in a family where we were taught to mock and belittle others' beliefs. I didn't even realize how much harm I was causing until I saw how you reacted. I want to thank you for standing up for what's right." The room was silent. Once more, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with reflection. The crew members' words seemed to resonate with everyone in the room, including the hosts. They, too, began to feel the gravity of the situation. It was clear that this was no longer just about a TV show or a moment of tension. It was about something much deeper. Megan, who had been struggling to maintain control of the conversation, turned to the camera and gave a small, reluctant nod. "I think we've all learned something today, and Keanu, I apologize if my words caused any offense. That was never my intention." Keanu nodded, his gaze never leaving Megan's. "It's not about intent, it's about accountability. Words matter." The truth of that statement hung in the air like an unspoken vow. And it wasn't just the hosts who felt it. The audience, too, had been drawn into this quiet moment of introspection. In that instant, the show's producers knew that this episode would not be like any other. The power of one man's quiet conviction had changed the course of the conversation. But more than that, it had ignited something deeper. A ripple of self-awareness had begun, and it was clear that the conversation around respect, faith, and accountability would continue long after the cameras stopped rolling. Keanu's words had transcended the studio. They had planted a seed in the minds of those who had witnessed the moment. And that seed, though small, would grow. As the camera's red light flickered off and the show moved toward its conclusion, the crew began to prepare for the next segment. But the atmosphere had changed. The usual banter and light-hearted chatter that followed a tense moment were replaced with a quiet sense of reflection. Megan took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had transpired. "Keanu," she said, her voice now calm and respectful, "you've certainly given us a lot to think about. I can't thank you enough for bringing this perspective to our show today." Keanu offered a small smile. "Thank you for having me. I hope this opens up a conversation that we can all continue in a respectful way." The producers signaled that the show was about to end, but as Keanu stood up, ready to leave, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Not from the applause or recognition, but from the knowledge that he had spoken his truth, and in doing so perhaps had changed something for the better. Have you ever experienced a moment where you were forced to confront something uncomfortable? How did it affect you, and what did you learn from it? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Keanu's words continue to inspire reflection, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. There's still more to come, and this story isn't over yet. The live show had ended, but the impact of Keanu's words lingered in the air, long after the cameras had stopped rolling. Backstage, the crew members shuffled about, some in deep conversation, while others processed what had just unfolded. The producers were huddled in a corner, discussing the unforeseen turn of events. Megan, though still rattled, stood off to the side, reflecting on the most unexpected conversation she had ever had on air. Keanu, however, remained as calm and composed as ever. He wasn't here for accolades or acknowledgement. He had come with a purpose, and in his quiet way, he had achieved it. He found a quiet corner in the backstage area and sat down on one of the chairs. His mind wasn't focused on what he had just done, but rather on what would come next. Keanu had never been one to speak out in such a public way, but today, something had shifted in him. It wasn't just about confronting a moment of disrespect. It was about standing up for the values he held dear, and in doing so, he had created an opportunity for others to reconsider their own beliefs and actions. Megan approached him slowly, her face now devoid of the smirk that had previously accompanied her every word. The weight of their conversation had shifted something in her as well. She wasn't just a host anymore. She was a person who had been called out and had learned something profound. "I owe you an apology, Keanu," she said, her voice softer than it had been earlier. "I didn't realize how much harm I was causing with my words. I'm sorry." Keanu looked up at her, his expression gentle, almost reassuring. "We all make mistakes, Megan. The important thing is that we learn from them." She nodded, visibly moved by his response. "I've spent so much time focusing on what gets ratings, what gets laughs, that I forgot about the responsibility I have. Today, you've made me realize that we can do better, that we can entertain without hurting others." Keanu smiled, a warm, understanding smile. "I think we all forget sometimes. It's easy to get caught up in the noise, but it's never too late to change, to be more mindful of how we affect others." For a brief moment, the two of them stood, in silence, both contemplating the weight of the exchange. Keanu's words weren't just words, they were a call to action. They were a reminder that respect was paramount, and that each of us, in our own small way, had the power to either build or destroy. Later that evening, Keanu found himself reflecting once again, but this time in the solitude of his hotel room. He sat by the window, staring out at the city lights, his thoughts turning inward. He wasn't looking for validation, nor was he interested in becoming some sort of hero. He had simply spoken up because it felt like the right thing to do. But as the night deepened, he realized that the events of the day had stirred something deeper within him. It wasn't just about defending his faith or calling out disrespect. It was about giving people permission to be more thoughtful, to be more kind in their everyday lives. The ripple effects of what had happened on The View that day had already begun to spread. Social media exploded with reactions, many in support of Keanu's stance. People from all walks of life began to share their thoughts on the importance of respect and the power of words. It wasn't just about a celebrity making a stand. It was about a moment of collective awakening, where the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. Keanu's heart felt a sense of peace. The world might not change overnight, but today a small spark had been ignited, and perhaps that spark would lead to something more. The next morning, Keanu woke up to dozens of messages, text messages, social media posts, and even emails. The support was overwhelming, but what struck him the most were the stories people shared. Many expressed how Keanu's words had reminded them of their own beliefs, how they had been inspired to reflect on the words they spoke and the way they treated others. Even Megan had reached out with a heartfelt message, thanking him once again for challenging her in such a profound way. Keanu wasn't interested in the praise, but he couldn't help but smile as he read some of the messages. It wasn't about being right. It was about creating space for people to reconsider the way they interacted with one another. And in the end, that was enough for him. As Keanu prepared to leave the city, he thought about the journey he had just taken, both for himself and for the millions who had witnessed his stand on national television. The confrontation on The View had become a turning point, not just for Meghan, but for the wider conversation surrounding respect, faith, and accountability. The world was a complex place, filled with both joy and pain, laughter and sorrow, but Keanu had learned that no matter how chaotic life became, there was always room for kindness, for understanding, and for growth. Have you ever had a moment where something someone said completely changed the way you saw the world? How did it affect you, and what did you take away from it? Let's continue this conversation below. If Keanu's journey has inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more. The world is full of moments that can shift everything, and we can all be part of creating those moments. The weeks that followed Keanu's appearance on The View were nothing short of transformative. What had started as an intense moment on live television evolved into a global conversation about respect, accountability, and the power of words. The hashtag Keanu Reeves, respect, spread across social media, with countless people sharing stories of how they had re-examined their own actions or had reached out to others to apologize for words they'd once thoughtlessly spoken. Keanu's quiet stand had ignited something bigger than he could have imagined. It wasn't about him, it was about the change it inspired in others. The discussions, sparked by his message, transcended the boundaries of his career, reaching into classrooms, boardrooms, and dinner tables all over the world. What was once a fleeting moment on a talk show had become a cultural movement, one built on empathy, humility, and the simple yet profound idea that the way we treat one another matters. As Keanu prepared to speak at a special event months later, one aimed at encouraging dialogue about kindness and respect, he was acutely aware of the weight of his own journey. The event would bring together people from all walks of life, from young activists to seasoned professionals, from families to educators. But Keanu had no grand speech planned. He had learned over the past few months that the most meaningful conversations came from the heart, not from a script. The event took place in a large auditorium, its walls filled with the hum of anticipation. Keanu stood at the front, ready to address the crowd. As he walked up to the microphone, he paused, taking a moment to survey the room. His eyes swept over the faces in front of him, diverse, eager, curious. They were all here because something in his words had resonated with them. He took a deep breath and began, his voice steady but reflective. I never imagined that one conversation, one moment, could spark such a shift, Keanu began, his tone humble yet firm. I didn't come here to make myself a hero, and I'm certainly not here for applause. But I stand before you today grateful for the opportunity to speak about something that matters, respect. Respect for ourselves, for others, for our differences and for our shared humanity. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Keanu continued, we live in a world that is often quick to judge, quick to dismiss. We get caught up in our own lives, our own struggles, and we forget that kindness can go a long way. It's easy to mock, easy to belittle, but it's not always easy to be kind, and it's not always easy to admit when we're wrong. He paused, letting the words sink in. I'm here today to encourage all of us to take a step back, to reflect on our actions. We all make mistakes. We've all hurt others, intentionally or unintentionally. But growth, true growth, comes when we take responsibility for those mistakes, and it comes when we choose to do better. The crowd was visibly moved, some with tears in their eyes, others nodding in agreement. Keanu continued, words are powerful. They can break a person or they can build them up, and it's up to us how we use them. If we can learn to listen more than we speak, to respect before we criticize, to offer compassion instead of judgment, we'll create a world where kindness is the norm. There was a long pause, and then, slowly, a ripple of applause spread throughout the room. It wasn't loud or boisterous, but it was real, a quiet, heartfelt acknowledgement of the message Keanu had shared. Keanu stepped back from the microphone, his eyes scanning the room once more. His heart swelled with a sense of accomplishment, not because he had delivered a perfect speech, but because he had ignited a deeper conversation. He had given people permission to be vulnerable, to be better, and to be kind. After the event, Keanu left the stage feeling something he rarely allowed himself to feel: hope. Hope that the world, while flawed, still had the capacity for change. That with each thoughtful conversation, with each act of kindness, we could move closer to the world we all wanted to see. It was a small step, but it was a step nonetheless. In the weeks following, the ripple effect continued. Conversations about respect became a central theme in public discussions. People began to hold themselves accountable for their words and actions, and they began to understand that the responsibility for fostering kindness wasn't just on others, it was on each of them. Keanu had spoken out that fateful day on The View, not because he wanted to make a statement, but because he knew that the cost of silence was too great. His quiet act of courage had sparked something more profound than he could have predicted. As Keanu walked through the city streets, his mind was clear, his heart full. He wasn't just Keanu Reeves, the actor. He was a person who had spoken. His truth, and in doing so, had created a small but significant shift in the world around him. And that, in the end, was enough. If you were in Keanu's shoes, would you have been brave enough to speak out in such a public way? What role do you think words play in shaping the world around us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more conversations that challenge us to think, reflect, and grow. Together, we can create a more respectful and compassionate world. The days following Keanu's emotional speech were a blur. His inbox was flooded with messages, from fans, from strangers, from people who had watched his stand on The View and had been deeply affected by it. But among all the messages, one stood out to him. It wasn't from a fan or a celebrity, but from a teacher in a small town in Ohio, who had written about how Keanu's words had sparked a change in her classroom. The message was simple but powerful. I showed my students your interview today. We spent the next hour discussing what respect really means and how we can be more mindful of our words. They're already thinking about how they can make a difference, even in small ways. Thank you for making me rethink how I teach my students about kindness. Keanu smiled as he read it, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This, he realized, was why he had spoken out. Not for the applause, not for the recognition, but for moments like this, moments where his words could ignite a change. In others, a change that could echo through communities, schools, and even families. It wasn't just a momentary shift, it was a movement. And it was spreading. But even as Keanu received messages of support, he couldn't ignore the ripple effects that were still unfolding. Not everyone was pleased with what he had done. Some of the backlash had come from unexpected places, particularly from people in the entertainment industry who had criticized him for taking things too seriously. A few tabloids had picked up the story, casting Keanu as a holier-than-thou figure, trying to lecture the world on something as personal as faith and respect. Keanu wasn't naive enough to think everyone would agree with him. He understood that his stance would create division, but it didn't deter him. In fact, the more he thought about it, the more resolute he became. He hadn't been looking for validation from the media or from his peers. What mattered to him was that he had acted on what he believed was right, regardless of the opinions of others. One evening, a few weeks after the initial broadcast, Keanu was invited to a private event at a community center in Los Angeles. It wasn't a glamorous event. There were no red carpets or flashing cameras, just a gathering of people who had been impacted by his message. The event was organized by a group of grassroots activists, many of whom had been working for years to foster kindness and respect in their neighborhoods. Keanu wasn't sure what to expect, but as he walked into the small room, he was greeted by an unexpected warmth. People of all ages, races, and backgrounds were there: parents, students, social workers, and even some former critics who had come to offer their support. It was in this room, surrounded by ordinary people who were doing extraordinary things, that Keanu realized how much of an impact his words had truly made. Here were the real heroes, those who quietly worked every day to build bridges between people, to foster understanding, and to encourage respect in ways both big and small. As Keanu spoke to the crowd, he wasn't there to teach them anything new. Instead, he listened. He listened to their stories of struggle, their triumphs, their challenges, and their hopes. He heard about the efforts to combat bullying in schools, to bring empathy into workplaces, and to create safer spaces for marginalized communities. In return, Keanu shared his own experience, the way he had felt compelled to speak out on The View, not because he was trying to make a political statement, but because he believed that when we mock others, we only diminish ourselves. He talked about the importance of speaking out, but also the importance of listening, really listening, to those who were affected by words that cut deep. The room was quiet for a moment, as his words settled in. And then, someone from the back of the room raised their hand. It was a woman in her early 30s, her face serious but kind. "I was one of the people who didn't understand your stance at first," she said. "I thought it was just a show, just another celebrity making a fuss. But after watching the show and hearing what you said, I started thinking. It's not just about respect for Jesus or any particular belief. It's about respecting each other, no matter who we are or where we come from." The room nodded in agreement, and Keanu, looking out at the faces of the people in front of him, felt a sense of connection. This was why he had spoken up, not for fame, not for validation, but to spark this type of change, the kind that happens when people open their hearts and minds to something greater than themselves. As the event came to a close, Keanu took one last look at the crowd, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He wasn't sure where this journey would take him next, but he was certain of one thing. The power of respect and the importance of using words carefully had become a personal mission for him. He had helped start a conversation, and now it was up to others to carry it forward. He left the community center that night feeling a quiet sense of pride, knowing that his actions had rippled out into the world in ways he hadn't fully understood at the time. Have you ever had a moment where you were challenged to rethink your views on respect? What did it teach you about yourself and others? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Your story matters, and together we can keep this dialogue going. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with more conversations that inspire reflection and growth. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest change. Keanu was still processing the profound effect his words had had on others, but life continued as it always did, busy and unpredictable. In the months that followed, his quiet act of standing up for respect had become something much larger. His stance had been a catalyst, sparking a national conversation about the importance of empathy, kindness, and thoughtfulness. What started with one comment on a live television show had evolved into a movement, one that was steadily gaining momentum. While Keanu never sought fame or validation from his actions, he began to notice small, powerful changes in his day-to-day life. As he walked through the streets of Los Angeles, he encountered strangers who would stop him and thank him for speaking out. Some would tell him that their families had started more meaningful conversations, while others shared that they had reevaluated their approach to life and relationships. For Keanu, those moments were more rewarding than any movie premiere or box office success. But despite all the praise and support, Keanu felt that his journey was far from over. He had started a conversation, yes, but what was more important now was seeing it through, ensuring that the shift he had sparked would continue to grow. Keanu knew that change didn't happen overnight, and this would be no different. It would take time, effort, and persistence. But he was ready for that. 1. Afternoon, as Keanu was in his studio, brainstorming ideas for his next project, he received an unexpected invitation. It was an invitation to join a global summit on social change. The summit would bring together thought leaders, activists, celebrities, and influencers to discuss issues like mental health, social justice, and how to create positive change in the world. The summit would take place in a few months, and Keanu wasn't sure what to expect, but something in him knew this could be another opportunity to expand on the message he had started. The invitation was not just about his celebrity status. It was about the words he had spoken, the values he stood for, and the ripple effect those words had caused. Keanu had no intention of becoming the face of the movement, but he did know this. If he could use his platform to continue to inspire, to continue to encourage kindness, and to foster the respect he had spoken of, he would. After days of reflection, Keanu decided to accept the invitation. It wasn't about public appearances or accolades. It was about continuing the conversation and using his voice for good. This was his chance to be part of something bigger, something that had the potential to create lasting change. It was time to step up and meet the moment. The day of the summit arrived, and Keanu was in the heart of a bustling city. The event was taking place in a large conference center filled with experts, activists, and public figures, all coming together to discuss some of the world's most pressing issues. As Keanu stepped onto the stage for his opening remarks, he felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. This was a different environment, a different kind of stage. This wasn't a movie set or a press conference. It was a gathering of people who truly wanted to change the world. Keanu took a deep breath and walked up to the podium. The room quieted, and all eyes were on him. He wasn't here to speak about fame or movies. He was here to speak about something far more meaningful. He began, his voice steady and calm. "When I spoke out on The View," Keanu began, "it wasn't because I thought I had the answers. It wasn't because I wanted to be a hero. It was because in that moment, I felt the need to stand up for something bigger than myself. I spoke because I believe in respect. I believe that we have a responsibility to each other to use our words carefully, to listen more than we speak, and to treat others with kindness, no matter who they are." The audience sat in rapt attention, and Keanu continued, "Respect is something we can all give, no matter our background, no matter our beliefs. It's not a gift we reserve for the people we agree with, but something we show to everyone. It's easy to mock, it's easy to belittle, but it's much harder to show understanding, compassion, and empathy. But that's what the world needs. More of today." Keanu paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "What I've learned through all of this is that change is possible, but it starts with us. It starts with the small things we do every day. The words we choose, the way we treat others, the way we choose to listen." There was a brief silence in the room as the audience reflected on his words. And then, slowly, the applause began. It wasn't loud, but it was heartfelt. This wasn't about celebrity, it was about the message. As the summit continued, Keanu took part in a number of panels, discussing topics related to kindness, the impact of words, and how to foster empathy in communities. He engaged in conversations with fellow activists, educators, and influencers, all of whom were passionate about creating a more compassionate world. Keanu was just one part of this larger conversation, but his role in it was significant. The words he had spoken had inspired others to take action in their own ways, and the energy in the room was palpable. After the summit ended, Keanu felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about the recognition. It was about the change he had helped spark, the lives he had touched, and the people who had been moved by his message. He left the event feeling a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the journey he had started was just beginning. Have you ever felt like your actions, big or small, could help spark change in the world? What steps are you taking to contribute to a kinder, more respectful society? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Remember, every small act of kindness counts. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge us to reflect, grow, and change the world for the better. Together, we can make a difference, one word at a time. It had been nearly a year since that fateful appearance on The View. Keanu had traveled the world, participated in numerous events, and spoken with countless people, each time spreading his message of respect, empathy, and the power of words. And while his journey had taken him to places he never imagined, he never lost sight of the simple truth he had embraced. Change, real change, begins with the individual. As Keanu sat on a quiet bench in a park one afternoon, the sun dipping low, in the sky he reflected on everything that had happened. The public discourse around respect had shifted, slowly but steadily. Conversations that once felt taboo, Discussions about kindness, empathy, and accountability had become part of the fabric of everyday life. But it wasn't just the headlines that mattered to him now. It was the subtle, quieter changes. The conversations around dinner tables, the new initiatives in schools, the small gestures of kindness he witnessed in his daily life. Keanu's phone buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from an old friend, someone who had been with him through many of the highs and lows of his career, someone who knew the real Keanu, the one who wasn't just the Hollywood actor, but the man who had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it wasn't popular. "Hey, just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You've done something incredible. You've sparked a real shift, not just in people's minds, but in their hearts. Keep going, brother." Keanu smiled and hit reply, typing a simple message. "Thanks, my friend. It's been a wild ride, but it's just the beginning." As he sent the message, he knew deep down that the journey wasn't over. It couldn't be. His stand on The View had opened the door to something far bigger than just a media moment. It had led him to a deeper understanding of his own role in the world, and he wasn't ready to stop pushing for change, no matter how small or quiet that change might seem. A few months later, Keanu found himself in a meeting with a new partner, an organization that had been quietly working to bridge gaps between different communities. They had reached out to him after seeing the ripple effects of his message. They had noticed the shifts that were happening in classrooms, workplaces, and public spaces. They had seen the power of Keanu's words in action, and they believed his platform could help bring even more attention to their cause. Their mission was clear. They wanted to provide resources to help young people develop better communication skills that would allow them to navigate difficult conversations, practice empathy, and resolve conflicts without resorting to judgment or hostility. Keanu, feeling deeply aligned with their goals, agreed to become an official advocate for the organization. The partnership marked a new chapter in his journey, one where he could combine his passion for acting with his newfound commitment to creating change. Keanu wasn't just showing up at events anymore. He was using his position to invest in long-term solutions to help people become better versions of themselves, not just in the way they acted, but in the way they spoke to and treated others. A few weeks after the partnership was announced, Keanu appeared in a video campaign for the organization. The video showed him speaking directly to young people, encouraging them to think critically about the words they used and how their actions affected those around them. In the video, Keanu was calm, deliberate, his usual warm but slightly reserved presence shining through. "I've always believed that words are powerful," he said. "They can tear us down or they can lift us up. When we choose respect, when we choose empathy, we change the world. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take fame or a huge platform. It just takes one person, one conversation at a time." Keanu paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I know I've made mistakes. I know we all have. But we have the power to change, to learn, and to grow. And that's what this is all about. It's about building each other up, not tearing each other down." The video campaign was a hit, with millions of views across various social platforms. It wasn't about selling products or promoting a brand. It was about spreading a message, and the world was listening. Months later, Keanu found himself once again back at a small community event, this time in a town that had been impacted by an unexpected crisis. It was a place where people had lost trust in each other, where divisions had formed, and where kindness had become something of a rarity. Keanu wasn't there to promote a project or give a speech. He was simply there to listen. He walked through the streets, talking with locals who had seen firsthand how the world could be changed when respect was given, even in the most difficult circumstances. People shared stories of coming together to rebuild their neighborhoods, to reconcile long-held grudges, and to support one another through hardship. And there, in the midst of it all, Keanu understood something crucial. The true measure of change wasn't found in grand speeches or headlines. It was found in these quiet moments, in the small but powerful connections between people. It was found in the hearts of everyday individuals who were taking it upon themselves to be better, to do better, and to teach others to do the same. Keanu stood at the edge of a bustling street corner, watching as people greeted each other with genuine smiles. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was a community that had chosen kindness over judgment, respect over mockery, and understanding over division. He didn't need to be the center of attention. He didn't need the spotlight. What mattered was that in some way, his actions had helped contribute to this shift. His willingness to stand up, to speak out when it mattered, had sparked something that was slowly spreading, one person at a time. Keanu had come full circle. The movement he had started, even if unintentionally, was no longer just about him. It was about everyone. It was about every person who chose to speak with kindness, who chose to listen before reacting, and who committed to treating others with respect. The world was still imperfect. There were still struggles, conflicts, and misunderstandings, but as Keanu stood there watching people interact with one another, he felt hopeful. He knew that even in the smallest acts, change was happening, and sometimes that was all it took to start something beautiful. If you could make one small change in your daily life that would promote more kindness and respect, what would it be? What's one conversation you could start today that might make a difference in someone's life? We invite you to share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to continue joining us on this journey of growth, understanding, and compassion. Together, we can make the world a kinder place. One word, one action, and one person at a time.